like to start and going through a few housekeeping rules to ensure a smooth and flow discussion. Please make sure that your cell phones are on silent. If you need to leave the room, kindly do so quietly and return without any disrupting the session. There will be a Q&A session towards the end, so please hold your question until the end. If you have any question, you can raise your hand at the end of the session, and we will have your question addressed either to one of the panelists, or it can be an open question to any of the panelists. For those who attend online, welcome, and thank you for joining us online. That interpretation also will be available. You can select it from the bottom, choosing the word of interpretation. Choose the language that you want. Also, submitting question will be over the chat box. We would love to receive your question and address them by end of the session. For those attending here, please, if you didn't get your interpretation device, you can get it now before we start the session. And I hand over now to my colleague Denise to lead this discussion. Mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Hamad. I wasn't going to do this, but Hamad insists, so please bear with me for a minute. To give you a little background, I am originally from Cuba. And when we were assigned to this topic, I don't think the people that assigned us knew this story. Sorry, I'm gonna calm down. When people were leaving the country after the revolution, there were acts of repudiation that were done. And we were called worms, gusanos. And then as an adult, I realized that one of the initial indices of a genocide was in Rwanda, when they would call people cockroaches. So what do you do with worms and cockroaches? You step on them. It's a process of dehumanization that tears down. And my mother would say to me, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt you. But they do. And I realized that demeaning and degrading language that invites or incites others to look at an individual or a group of people as less than is the open door to the things that we're going to be talking about today, about hate crimes, about violence, and about radicalization. So with that, in our interconnected world, and we're facing all these challenges of racism and hate speech and hate crimes, we need to disrupt. Well, those are disruptors of the fabric of society. They invite classifying people as being less than human, and as a result, having no, what's to hold somebody back if they are less than human, to sell them into slavery, or to have a genocide, or to do whatever else, because they don't count, after all. This panel aims to look at the multifaceted nature of intolerance and to discuss the pivotal role that faith communities can play in promoting peace and justice. And I'm delighted to introduce our panelists, beginning to my right, at the far end, Sheikh Ibrahim Lethome, from Kenya. No, yes, Kenya. Next to him is Rabbi Diana Gerson. And I am going to ruin your name.
Yeah, but Herizal.
Mohammed Herizal. To my over here on the other side of Hamad is His Excellency Muzaffar Kamilov, advisor to the President of Uzbekistan. And at the far left to me is our good friend Knox Thames, formerly of the U.S. State Department and now at Pepperdine University, and also, I believe, you've done work with USIP, U.S. Institute for Peace.
Online as well.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
Online as well.
Oh, and online, we have James Patton, and he is president and CEO of the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy. And our initial speaker and presenter for the first few minutes will be Audrey. Please help me. How do you pronounce your last name?
Audrey Kitagawa.
And Audrey has many things to her credit, not the least of which is the work that she does in this space. But I will turn over the time to Audrey to tell us a little bit more about what brings her to be our speaker today. Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that introduction. And hello, everyone from New York City. My name is Audrey Kitagawa, and I'm the chair of the Anti-Racism Initiative of the G20 Interfaith Forum. And I'm pleased to welcome everyone to our discussion on the critical topic, confronting racism, hate crimes, and radicalization. Racism and all its myriad forms is a crisis of crises, a blight on individuals, families, communities, and societies, one that cripples policies and structures, and an undermining force that thwarts our efforts in addressing the many planetary challenges that we face. Racial injustice and practices undermine the values of tolerance, justice, inclusion, and human dignity, eroding the very foundation of human and planetary security. Racism relates to the many issues confronting the G20 leaders, including those identified as priorities by G20's 2024 Brazilian presidency as 1, the fight against hunger, poverty, and inequality; 2, the 3 dimensions of sustainable development, which are economic, social, and environmental; and 3, the reform of global governance. Today's discussion has broad implications. We are addressing issues that strike at the heart of human rights and the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Our topic today revolves around racism as it relates to hate speech and radicalization, and is central to the discussion of these subjects is hate speech. Hate speech is an expression of racism, an instigator of violence, and anyone who hears it spreads toxicity and a division among our society. Promulgated in an age of social media and other online platforms, it rapidly spreads the seed of radicalization, violence, conflict, and war. Religious and interfaith efforts are, and will continue to be, vital to addressing hate, which is the antithesis of the core of spiritual values of peace, nonviolence, loving kindness, and the nurturing of our inner potential. Interfaith and multicultural efforts will be crucial to weaving strands of cooperation, trust, and tolerance that hold together our multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multi-religious societies, a fact recognized by the international community. Adopted on June 14, 2023, UN Resolution 2686 acknowledges the crucial role of interreligious efforts. The resolution urges the international community to prevent incitement and condemn hate, racism, and acts of extremism, and emphasizes the need for interreligious and intercultural dialogue as an important tool to achieve peace, social stability, and internationally agreed development goals, as well as essential to to prevent the spread of intolerant ideology and incitement to hatred. The detailed guidance on implementation for United Nations field presences of the United Nations Strategy and Plan of Action on Hate Speech also highlights the importance of religious actors and intercultural, interfaith, and intra-religious dialogue in its 13 commitments. And I recommend that you read this plan of action to review all of the 13 commitments. It is also critical that G20 states recognize interfaith collaboration and dialogue as a promoter of inclusivity and cooperation. In its 2024 policy brief, the Anti-Racism Initiative recommends that the G20 recognize and utilize in all its expressions the significant role which interfaith organizations already play in recognizing and addressing the legacy of systemic racism. The policy brief has the following key points. 1, to establish within the G20 a high-level international commission on racism, which would act as a solid analytic foundation for continuing action. The goals of this commission would be 1, to give central prominence to an issue that affects each of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in both national and international relations, by tasking the G20 leaders with responsibility to act. 2, to assemble a tightly organized, multidisciplinary group of respected statespeople, scholars, interreligious leaders, and experts charged with gathering collective wisdom to develop positive action plans. And 3, to set out specific principles and proposals that will spur appropriate and urgent actions, such as the eradication of racist language and racist legislation that may still exist. And I ask all of you to please go to the IF20 website to see the entirety of the policy briefs of the Anti-Racism Initiative. Thank you so much for this invitation to have me give introductory remarks on this important topic. And I now turn the floor over to our moderators. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Audrey. Now, if we could invite each, starting, Sheikh Ibrahim, would you care to give us 2-3 minutes of your initial
Thank you very
impression?
much. Good morning, everyone, and assalamu alaikum. My name is Sheikh Ibrahim Lethome from Kenya, and I'm happy to be here, and also for the organizers for trusting that I will add value to this. When I look at the subject of discussion here, racism, hate crime, and radicalization, and usually when I talk about radicalization, I add radicalization into violent extremism, because sometimes I find no problem in being radicalized. The problem is radicalization into violent extremism. I see the common thread between all those is one, us versus them, dividing humanity into those two. Us, who believe that we are in the right, and them, who we believe are not in the right. And that's why, as you said, Madam Moderator, some people refer to others as cockroaches, some people refer to others as worms. We have the Al-Shabaab across the border with Somalia. They refer to people who do not agree with them as kafir, and a kafir is not a human being. You can kill them. So for me, if you ask me, the biggest challenge that is facing the world today, besides climate change, I think it's hate speech, racism, and radicalization into violent extremism. And the way I want to look at it is this. I am an African, a black African. I did not sit for an exam, or I did not go for an interview for me to be who I am and belong where I am. It is beyond me. Those who are white, they did not apply to be whites. Those who are colored, none of us apply to be where we are. Even for religion, believe me, 90% of us belong to the religious community that we belong to, not because you chose, but because you found yourself there. So we need to confront these problems because they are a hurdle to solve many other problems facing humanity. So we need to confront them, and I believe religion has the answer to these problems, because my belief, backed by religious teachings, is that diversity is not an accident. Diversity is within God's divine plan. And within that plan, God has a plan on how we should coexist. Even religious diversity, and I'll be quoting from my religious book. I can even quote from the Bible, because I have both backgrounds, both traditions, Christianity and Islam, to show that it is not an accident. Had God so willed, and God is almighty, he would have made all of us Chinese, all of us whites, all of us blacks. But in his wisdom, there are all these diversities. Thank you.
Sheikh Ibrahim Lethome for your introduction, and now from the far right to Knox, Thames, to give us a brief for 2 or 3 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just a few comments. I have a book coming out next week about how to end religious persecution, and I talk about education as a powerful tool and an underutilized tool to engage an extremist, a radicalized mindset. One component of any education strategy, we heard about it in the previous session, is tolerance education. Teaching kids, children, giving them the tools that they need to engage the world around them, to understand the different beliefs and cultures that they're engaging with every day. Because if we fail to do that, they're hearing other voices through social media, through their networks. The second type of education that my program at Pepperdine University is starting to explore is the power of sacred sites, to teach the layered histories of a community's own past, and to use that as a jumping off point to foster conversations about how do we live together in diversity today. I saw when I was a diplomat representing the United States, advocating for human rights, oftentimes those engagements were confrontational, but what we're discovering is by looking at a community's own history of diversity, it's a much more positive way to start the engagement. That way it's about listening, not pointing, and we recognize the good and the bad. These are complicated stories, but we use them as a way to think about living together today in the diversity that's everywhere around us. And the last part of education I talk about in my book is legal education, in the sense that if crimes are committed, if hate speech leads to violence and law enforcement isn't brought to bear to arrest people, to punish people, that also is a form of education. It teaches that certain acts will be permissible in a society, and that will only foster a climate of impunity and further victimization of minorities. But in addition, this session is about radicalization and hate speech. And so I would just very quickly, and this is a much longer conversation, talk about how legal efforts in the United Nations have turned legitimate concerns about hate speech into civilizational divides, where we see the bloc of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation versus the United States and Europe having huge fights in Geneva and New York over defamation of religions, over creating laws that penalize speech that may be distasteful, but turning it into something criminal. There's been a lot of work to find a common ground, and that was established about 10 years ago through Resolution 1618, which reset the debate. But I'm very concerned that with the global conflicts we're seeing around the world, bad actors are using these challenging situations to reignite debates that were settled in New York, that were settled in Geneva, to create those cleavages that actually just stir up hostility between countries in ways that aren't profitable towards the victims we're all trying to help. So I think there's a larger conversation about how to apply Article 18, Article 19, Article 20 of the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights in a way that addresses the root drivers of hate speech while protecting freedom of speech and freedom of belief.
Thank you so much, Knox. And congratulations for your book in advance.
That's what the title is and who's publisher.
Yeah. And from Brasilia here, we go maybe online to James Patton. I'm not sure if you hear us, James?
Yeah, I do. Do you hear me okay?
So, yeah, great. James Patton, President and CEO of International Center of Religion and Diplomacy. We give you 3 minutes to give your introduction about the topic.
Great. Well, thank you. And I'm assuming these are not the longer comments, right? Because I have about 5 or 6 minutes on comments, which I could truncate if needed. Or are these the full comments that you'd like me to make? Then we'll go to question and answer.
We designed the session here to start with a brief, let's say, comment, starting with 2 to 3 minutes, then followed by discussion between the panelists and the moderators, followed by question and answer from attendants here in the room and virtual as well.
Yeah, thanks. So bear with me, please, because I had gotten a 5-minute guide, but I just want to make one clarification, and thank you to everybody. I wish I could have been there with you. Travel out of Washington was very hard Sunday night, so I'm missing the conversation directly with a lot of you. I do want to clarify, I'm no longer the president and CEO of ICRD. I have moved to a senior advisor role, as I am, after 13 wonderful years there, moving. As of September, I'll be joining the woman-led extraordinary consulting group, Lead Integrity. I encourage you to look that up. And I'll also be a senior fellow at the Rumi Forum's Center for Faith, Identity, and Globalization. So let me just quickly present a couple of practitioner ideas about the logic behind how people move towards social attitudes and acts of hatred. The first attitude I'd like to talk about is what I call mutuality. So to simplify, there are 2 ways of perceiving security, prosperity in a community of difference. And one is grounded in oppositional thinking. We've heard of this as zero-sum models, which essentially says if others do well, I will necessarily have my well-being negatively affected. The second framing is what I call mutuality. And that's where ecosystems of communities and identity groups collectively benefit from the improvements in conditions that affect all of them, and might be expressed as, in order for me to do well, I must ensure that others do well. But when this kind of oppositional perception takes hold, it can cause a cascade of self-reinforcing actions and reactions. The second concept I'd propose is what I call essentialism. So these zero-sum conflicts, they progress and groups become more susceptible to an identity reductionism. The characteristics of the in-group and the out-group become more and more narrowly defined, or even into a singular set of values and convictions and attitudes, which leads to a kind of civic authoritarianism, which I think we're seeing now, where the litmus test for inclusion or exclusion are increasingly strict and absolute, and the natural diversity of ideas that you generally see exists within a group becomes impermissible. Outgroups are seen as having simple wrong behaviors or beliefs. We've all heard things, the simplification of when you allude to another group, like, you know how those people are, which raise a bunch of assumptions about how they think or how they act. The third concept is existentialism. So essentialism becomes most likely to produce violence when those reduced identity perceptions are associated with fundamental social, human, or even moral value. This narrative suggests that the we group as a whole is righteous or inherently worthwhile, and the they group as a whole is sinister or not deserving of respect or care. And the great tipping point towards hatred and violence comes when the essentialized other, with an identity tied to moral negativity, is painted as a threat to one's very existence. That is, if they survive, we cannot. And then the only option is to eliminate them before they can eliminate you. And that elimination can range from stifling influence over social norms, reducing political access, or obviously destroying them through outright physical violence. And as mentioned, all of this requires dehumanization. So quickly, in terms of solutions, put simply, We have to return nuance to the identity of self and other, in-group and out-group. Amartya Sen wrote an excellent book on this called Identity and Violence, in which he argued that multiplicity of identities is one of the great tools to reduce prejudice and divisions and identity-based violence. It's very hard to dehumanize an entire group when you know and empathize with a member of that group who has challenged your fundamental belief in those kind of universal and reductionist definitions. And there are various methods for doing this. As a practitioner, that tends to be what I focus on, but most of them are grounded in finding shared values or common needs. And then finally, this question of religion. I think one of the current challenges with religion's role in these efforts is not to try to align values across faith traditions. I don't think we talk enough about the intra-religious struggle over concepts of the divine and divine will. So to go full circle and to come back to the beginning and simplify, there are two basic frameworks for faith. One in which the divine has created a very special group that's worthy of divine protection and reward, and everyone outside of that group is condemned, and oftentimes believers are even encouraged to persecute them. The other is the idea that the divine and divine intervention is meant for flourishing, for growth and wholeness and happiness and healing for all. Now, personally, I prefer to embrace a divinity that seeks healing over harm and kindness over callousness, dignity over disgust, and compassion over hostility. And I think our role as people in this space of faith is to encourage those narratives, and encourage that framework of belief. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. Really appreciate that thoughtful analysis and the way of approaching how we separate ourselves and others from us. Diana, could we have your contribution, please?
So it's good afternoon now, yes?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure I'm in the right time zone. Firstly, thank you all for choosing to be here, not just here in Brasilia, here at the G20 Interfaith Forum, but for coming to this session. I'm Diana Gerson. I am a Reform rabbi. I am based in New York City. I am the senior advisor on partnerships and external relationships for the Interfaith Alliance for Safer Communities. I'm also the executive vice president of the New York Board of Rabbis, which is the oldest, largest pluralistic rabbinic body in the world. And I look at this topic through a lot of different lenses, but I'm going to first hear from your lens. How many of you have been a victim of hate speech? Just by a show of hands. How many of our children have been victims of hate speech? More than half the room. This is not an existential conversation. This is our conversation. This is our lived experience. No matter how we look at it, someone has decided I am either on the in group or on the out group. When I was a child, I was about 5 years old, I went to kindergarten, and to be sure that I was one of 2 Jewish children in my elementary school. When I got to 3rd grade, my sister joined, so now there were 3. But in kindergarten, first day of school, the school nurse came and they were inspecting everybody's head for lice. And the teacher and the nurse spent probably about 5 minutes looking to figure out where did my horns come out of the top of my head. And I ran home after school and I said, "Mom, I have horns?" And my mother said, "Who said that? Where did this happen?" And I told her, and she immediately went to the rabbi and said, "What do I do?" And he thought about it, and he thought about it, and he said, have this conversation with Diana, have that conversation with Diana. Okay. Next year, we're all giving out cards for some holiday. We had little mailboxes that we made, and everybody put cards in. It didn't matter if it was Halloween or Thanksgiving or New Year's or whatever. And there was a note in the box that says, "Dear Diana, I'm glad we're friends, even though you're Jewish." Again, I go home. Mom, oh my God, like, what's wrong with me? And my mother said to me, hold on, I'll go talk to the rabbi. And you can understand that year after year this was happening, and the rabbi finally looked at my mother and said, maybe it's time that you think about moving. To literally change our location. We were 5 houses away from living in Teaneck, New Jersey, which has a very large Jewish community. And so my parents put the house on the market, sent me to summer camp. And I came home from the summer, and we had moved to Teaneck, and I went to school where I would say roughly a quarter of the school were Jewish kids. Now, Teaneck was an interesting place to grow up. And I say this because Teaneck is the first school system in the United States to voluntarily integrate the schools. The first. My high school graduating class, we were 325 students. We represented every faith you could imagine. We came from 32 different nations natively. We spoke 23 different languages. Everything I needed to know about diversity and unity came in that experience. Growing up with one another, sitting at each other's tables, celebrating each other's holidays, all of those incredible, incredible moments. I went to baptisms, and I went to christenings, and I went to bar mitzvahs, and all the coming of age ceremonies. You came against one of us, you came against all of us. And now, in my capacity in New York, and being part of the Choral, the Commission of Religious Leaders of the City of New York, well, I can tell you this. You come against one of us, you come against all of us. You desecrate a church, we all show up. You desecrate a synagogue, we all show up. And we work closely with one another because those relationships are so, so important. They're fundamental to survival and understanding. Because if we don't have strong relationships in the good times, you're going to be standing by yourself when things get rough. And this year, the last 12 months, we have seen so much upheaval in our world. And we don't have to name all the conflicts and all the problems. But I can name every single member of faith who stood up by our side. All of us. And I think that's where this conversation really needs to begin. The human side. Mayor Adams, Eric Adams, mayor of New York City, likes to say we talk about this race and racism, and he says there's one race, the human race. And we need to get back to those basics. And how do we do that together? So thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Excellency, we have a few minutes for you.
Thank you very much. Special greetings from the homeland of Avicenna, Al-Fraganus, Beruni, and Al-Kharazmi from Uzbekistan. Dear participants of the summit, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to see you all the 5th G20 Interfaith Forum Summit. I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to the organizers of this large-scale event, especially Mr. Miles Hans, the president of the Sterling Foundation, and Nicole Sterling, who was the reason for the participation of the Uzbek delegation in this prestigious conference for the first time. Located in the heart of Central Asia, the country of Uzbekistan with a rich history of 3,000 years, is considered one of the oldest cradles of civilization with cultural and scientific heritage. Located at the crossroads of the Great Silk Road, the main intercontinental trade and cultural network of the Middle Ages. This area was a center of enlightenment, science and learning, as well as the exchange of ideas, the beliefs, knowledge and crafts. During the long history of Uzbekistan, all religions of the world, Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Buddhism, different directions of Christianity, propagators of Islam passed through its land. Nevertheless, during several thousand years of history, there have never been conflicts on the basis of religion in the territory of Central Asia, and the minority religions have always felt themselves in peace and safety. This centuries-old tradition of the tolerance continues in New Uzbekistan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your introduction and speech. Now we move to Muhammad Herizal bin Hazri, member of Higher Committee of Human Fraternity in Abu Dhabi.
Thank you. Thank you, Hamad. Thank you, everyone. The good thing about coming in last is that they've said it all. So, I agree with everyone, just like any good, panel moderator would say. But before I start, I'd like to first send the regards of the Secretary General of the Higher Committee of Human Fraternity. His Excellency Ambassador Khalid Al-Gaith is very sorry that he couldn't make it here personally to be with us due to very tight working commitments. But I'm here instead. It shows that it shows our commitment, and it shows that this is very, very central to the strategy that we have at the Higher Committee of Human Fraternity moving forward. Now, like I said, I don't have much to add, but I thought it would probably be interesting to share some of my experiences that would probably relate to how we feel at the Higher Committee of Human Fraternity we want to address the issue of intolerance, the issue of hate speech, so on and so forth. Now, many years ago, when I was a lot younger, had more hair, didn't have to wear glasses, I found myself in Kabul right after the fall of Taliban. And I was one of the first people to arrive in Kabul to try and work towards building an institution that we realized after 30 years it didn't really work out. But I want to cut the story short. And at that time, the international community thought that it was high time for the people in Afghanistan to have institutions, to have proper institutions that will finally run by the people in Afghanistan themselves. Now that was my key responsibility to essentially set up these institutions for them. Interestingly, after all that hard work, I found myself one day in the Panjshiri Valley. If you're familiar, that's the place where Ahmad Shah Massoud, the great leader of the Panjshiri clan in Afghanistan, is buried. And I was talking to the community leaders over there about the importance of being organized and having institutions. And right after that, a child came to me. And obviously, I don't speak Dari or Pashto, and I had an interpreter. And the boy, aged maybe around 8 or 9 years old, came to me and asked me about this whole idea of democracy. What is this word? He has no idea what it means. What is human rights? He has never heard these concepts before. And he asked me whether if it would actually bear milk for his family. Is it a thing that can actually bear milk for his family? Is it a thing that can help him go to school? So that's one story. Again, years later, I found myself, for some odd reason, sitting on a peace panel in Mindanao. So I was one of the members of the peace process in Mindanao that led to the signing of the peace agreement between the government of Philippines and the Bangsamoro people. And that was a very big day for me when the signing happened. And again, I found myself being questioned by a child around the same age. And he asked me again whether if this piece of paper actually would allow him to go to school, would allow him to walk freely, would allow him to have friends, and would stop the war in his village. Why am I sharing you these stories? I think the investments that we need to put into the younger generation is essential for us to try and win this very complicated war against ourselves. This war is a war against the nature of humans that can be afraid because of various reasons, because of crisis of identity, because of this, because of that. And our investment is really in the younger generation because this work has to be continuous and it is in them that we have to invest. And that is one of the fundamental proposals that we have put into the strategy of the Higher Committee of Human Fraternity. And we are committed and invested to working with the younger people moving forward. And I can explore more in the later time if time permits. Thank you.
We're now going to be directing some questions to our members of the panel. And I will start again with Sheikh Ibrahim. Why is religion being increasingly viewed as a key driver here towards the very thing that seems antithetical to religion?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Let me begin by giving this real story. The date is the 2nd of May or April 2015. This is just about Easter time. A group of young people claiming to be fighting for Islam, belonging to Al-Shabaab, get into a university, which is about 100 kilometers from the border between Kenya and Somalia. At the end of the attack, to cut a long story short, 148 students are dead. 146 of them are Christians, 2 are Muslims. And the 2 who were Muslims happened to be security officers at the university who tried to stop them. At the end of the day, a group claiming to be fighting for Islam, Al-Shabaab, they claim responsibility. Myself and a few other Muslim religious leaders, we said, enough is enough. We cannot sit and watch this religion that we also belong to being misused. So is it true that religion is increasingly being misused? The answer is yes. The question is this: why religion? Yet when you look at the teachings of religion, they talk about peace. When I look at my book, the Quran, chapter 49, verse 13, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not even addressing Muslims, he's addressing people. Oh, you people, ya ayyuhan nas, we've created you from one man and one woman. I believe the forefathers of Rabbi Diana are also my forefathers. We came, all of us, from one father and one mother. Now, why are they using religion? Look at all the groups, even the Ku Klux Klan in the US, they're using religion. the kamikaze suicide bombers of Japan, the Tamil Tigers, the Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda, they use religion. Why? Because I've been in this space, because after 2015, I decided I'm no longer going to do anything else. I want to correct misconceptions about religion. Does religion support this? So, I can see I'm already being told to stop. The reason why religion is increasingly being used is because of the power of religion. I was sharing with my sister here, Rabbi, before we started, about the power of religion. And for me, the power of religion lies in three things. One, religion is very emotive to all of us. And you could see elements of that even yesterday in the auditorium. The power of religion, it's very emotive. Two, to many of us, we do not question religion. Once I am told the Quran has said that, many of us do not ask. The Torah says this, we don't ask. The Bhagavad Gita says this, we don't ask. So to many of us, religion is unquestionable. Three, religion promises a reward beyond this world. And that's why a 23-year-old young man, full of potential, decides he has no value for his life. He wants to end his life, and I wish he would only end his own life, but die with other people, blows himself up happily because he believes he's going to a better place. Therein lies the power of religion. So I believe religion is being exploited because of the power in it. Maybe given another chance, I'll explain what we are doing using religion to counter and to give an alternative narrative. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Ibrahim, from the power of religion and the exploitation of the religion. The second question goes to Knox, with your academic and practical experience on religion freedom and human rights. How do you see the intersection of hate speech and radicalization?
Well, they feed off each other. It's a negative synergy. Again, I think it's, as we're all people who value the freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief, want to protect people of all faiths and none so they don't have to live in fear of discrimination or violence. It's how do we intersect that cycle? How do we break that cycle? How do we prevent that cycle? The points I made in my brief presentation about the power of education, that helps us get upstream of the mentality that leads someone to commit unimaginable acts of violence. So much of the work that I was doing when I was a diplomat was after the fact. What do we do after ISIS attacked? What do we do after a government clamped down and victimized minorities because they hated what they believed or were afraid of what they believed? And that work is really important. We want, I certainly want my country, I want other countries who share these values to be upfront and very vocal about the importance of religious freedom, but we've got to develop other strategies that inoculate people from the virus of hate. And I think it's very encouraging to hear all the work of these panelists who are attacking this problem in their own context, in their own ways, bringing their own unique skills and gifts to it. And I think that's the hopeful message of this panel. In my book, which Denise was asking, it's entitled Ending Persecution, Charting a Path to Global Religious Freedom. It's published by University of Notre Dame Press, comes out September 1st, very excited about it. But it's a practical examination of the different types of persecution. The topic can seem monolithic. Just based on my experience, I break it down into 4 typologies. But I don't just admire the problem. I also have corresponding chapters that put forward ideas for ways the United States, other like-minded allies, and people like, now that I'm in civil society, people like us in civil society can also engage to create the world that we all want for ourselves and our children. But it's going to be hard work. But if we don't have conversations like this, we'll never get there. And so I think, maintaining this network is going to be crucially important. So really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
This question is to you, James. And I'd like you to comment on the way that thought leaders and the media can or are affecting this your analysis of essentialism and existentialism, and as either for better or worse. How are we, how's the media advancing that or interfering with that cycle? You could comment on that.
When I do an analysis of conflict intervention, a lot of times I look at the difference between mobilized actors, which are usually groups, and mobilizers, who are influential voices. They often have different kinds of motives and then require different kinds of interventions. Mobilizers tend to be people who see an opportunity for power. That could be wealth, that could be political power, or being able to have a greater voice to influence society. And the mobilized are oftentimes then they use their fears and concerns and sense of security and well-being in order to move them in a direction that supports the interests of the mobilizer, if that makes sense. So you have a lot of, whether it's media pundits or whether it's politicians, using that kind of reductionism in order to gain something for themselves. A big part of the problem is that nuance doesn't sell, right? Deep, thoughtful discussions about shared interests and shared identity across different groups is really hard to get into the kind of short clips that we now are addicted to in terms of our consumption of media. So it's much easier to just break it down into very simple bullet points about who we are, who the others are, and why those leaders, whether they be in the media or be in politics, why they need the support of the bigger group in order to resist this kind of monolithic identity of the other. And you've seen the impact of this. You've seen how media is becoming maybe less objective. You've seen politicians reducing their statements down to just simplified bullet points to advance interests. Our focus on social issues has again been reduced down to just a few points, people voting on single issues rather than a whole range of different complex ideas about how society can evolve. So I think, you know, the way to combat this really is to rebuild that kind of cross intersectionality between groups, whether it be civic organizations where people come together across difference and work on things that are local, or whether it be working in the new media to try to find a way to reverse its impact on this kind of separation of people and use it against itself in a way, turn it on its head and use it as a way to get people to know each other better. These are the challenges I think that we have to try to tackle in order to resist some of those pressures.
Thank you so much, James. Rebuild and having this relationship. I would like now to move to Rabbi Diana Gerson, and we would like to know how can religious leaders and institutions contribute to fostering environments that are resistant to hate and radicalization. And we would like to hear also some of examples that you do in your work.
So I'm thinking to myself about prevention strategies versus intervention. So I'm going to, I think, just drill down a little bit on the prevention, because I think an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Ben Franklin said it. I'm sure he didn't invent the phrase. What can we do to prevent hate, right? Because we start from the fundamental place of what is the opposite of love? I either love you or I hate you. But the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is fear. I fear the other. I fear what I don't know. I fear what I can't see. I fear what I don't understand. So how do we become familiar? How do we break down the level of fear? Where can we bring people together? There's a museum in Lower Manhattan. It is the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and is a living memorial to the Holocaust. And they have an interesting program for 5th graders. So roughly 9, 10 years old. And they bring together children who are 9, 10 years old from Jewish schools, Christian schools, and Muslim schools. And these children come together and they learn. They're learning a little bit of history, they're learning a lot about religion and faith, they're learning a lot about culture, traditions, and they go to each other's homes. They break bread together. They go to each other's houses of worship. They experience together. And at the end of the year, these children come together with their parents and their faith leaders.
Recording stopped.
And they come together and they create their own museum exhibit. It's amazing. They come together, you walk around the room, each child has a table, there's an artifact from their family, not from their house of worship, they don't get it from somewhere else, it's something from their family. I can imagine in my head what I would have brought. My grandparents who had escaped Kristallnacht out of Germany, they hid in the train, they got on a train, they got to Venice, from Venice they made their way to the UK. When they arrived in the UK, they received a box of chocolates. And it had a small note that said, "Precious chocolates, eat with care." And when they opened up the box of chocolates, they found their wedding bands that had been inserted inside the chocolates because they were afraid they would be taken from them. So if there was one thing I would have put on my table, would have been those wedding bands. And in fact, my family will be donating those to the museum, in future years. But the idea that these children then have to explain their artifacts to one another, and at the end of the night, they all come together and they talk about the experience that they've had. And what's extraordinary to me is that these children get up and they're from different communities. They come from different backgrounds. And to understand that, the Jewish community, the Christian community, the Muslim community, we're not binary communities, right? We are multifaceted, dimensional, and we are certainly multiracial and ethnic. And these children come together and they're like, I've never met somebody of this faith who looks like this, who talks like this, who eats like this, and I never would have met them if it hadn't been for this experience. And then they go and they tell their friends. And next thing you know, they're nominating other classes in other schools for the following year. We need to break these things down, and we need to do it as young as possible. You look at a bunch of 2-year-olds, they don't care. They don't care what faith you are. They don't care what race you are. They don't care. They just see another child they want to play with. We need to get back to those basics.
Mr. Ben Hazri, from the perspective of your organization, how do you deal with the differences and between intentional disinformation, misinformation that is unintentionally shared, and hate speech? How do you separate those and how do you tackle those? Because it seems to me like they would be different things.
Well, thank you. I think a lot of these things you would only realize whether if it's misinformation, disinformation, whether if it's hate speech after it happens. Unfortunately, when we live in this world, in this age of technology, by the time you realize that it has gone out to possibly 1 million people, and it's very difficult for you to undo it. So we don't spend so much time trying to define which is which and how do we differentiate it. I think the approach that we take is more on trying to build the strength and the identity of the people so that they themselves can evaluate, and we believe that humans are able to actually evaluate what is wrong and what is right. Not always necessarily, but most of the time they can evaluate and they can manage their sort of their actions based on this. Now, how to do that is the interesting part, I think. And again, just like, many of us who's moving into the senior category, we are full of stories. So I'm going to tell you another story. In 1996, when I was a lot younger as well, a bunch of us in Southeast Asia thought that there were too many political violence that was happening in countries in Southeast Asia. It started with the fall of the government in Cambodia, and there was a military coup. And then there was the economic crisis, and there was the fall of the government in Indonesia, there was Malaysia, there was the Philippines. I don't know if you remember Ferdinand Marcos and all of those political violence. Now, we thought that these are all affecting the communities in Southeast Asia too dearly, when actually many of these communities are not even involved in political movements. So a bunch of us students decided to start a movement to end political violence in Southeast Asia. It became, I thought, what young people today call viral. It was actually quite a viral movement at that time. And we worked in all of these countries in Southeast Asia, ranging from Cambodia to the Philippines. We would not like to take credit, but if you look at the statistics, since 1998 until today, you have almost zero political violence in Southeast Asia. And I think building in the younger generation and getting it to be part of their struggle is a very powerful sort of like approach, because I was once like that. And I would like to end, just for this, to say this, I want to quote the former president of Indonesia, who I aspire, President Sukarno. He said, bring me your support and I will shake this nation. But if you bring me 50 young people, I will shake the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamad. And now we move to His Excellency Muzaffar Kamilov. Your Excellency, we heard from faith leaders, we heard from NGOs, civil society, and now we would like to hear from also government perspective. So I think the speech will be in Uzbek, so if they need translation, I would recommend everyone to put the interpretation. Just give us a few minutes, Your Excellency. Make sure that everyone have his interpretation device.
Thank you very much. In my introductions, I will tell the experience of Uzbekistan into directions: interreligious tolerance and against radicalism. With your permission, I will speak in Uzbek.
Well, okay.
Can we have the slides?
Slides. Looking at the slides, please. Muhtaram forum qatnashchilari, 2017-yildan O'zbekiston Respublikasi o'z tarixini yangi sahifasini ochdi. Prezident Shavkat Mirziyoyev janobi oliylarning rahnamoliklarida O'zbekistonda barcha sohalarda yirik islohot va yangilanishlar amalga oshirilmoqda. Bugungi kunda mamlakatda 16 ta konfessiya ga mansub jami 2356 ta demak diniy tashkilotlar faoliyat yuritmoqda. Shundan 2159 tasi islom diniga, 197 tasi boshqa diniy konfessiyalarga taalluqli. Eshitilyaptimi? So'nggi 7 yil davomida mamlakatning barcha hududlarida 91 ta masjid, 23 ta cherkov ochilgan. Xuddi shu vaqt mobaynida respublika bo'yicha jami 350 ga yaqin masjidlar qayta qurildi hamda 555 ta masjid va 10 ga yaqin cherkov, 2 ta monastir binosi qayta kapital ta'mirlandi. Hozir kunda 14 ta islom bilim yurtlari bilan bir qatorda pravoslav va petidesatnik seminariyalari ham samarali faoliyat yuritmoqda. Ta'kidlash joizki, O'zbekistondagi diniy ta'lim muassasalari orasida Mir Arab 500 yillik, O'zbekiston xalqaro Ko'kaldosh madrasasi ham 500 yillik tarixga ega hisoblanadi. Shuningdek, Respublika prezidenti tashabbuslari bilan Islom sivilizatsiyasi markazi, O'zbekiston Xalqaro islom akademiyasi, Imom Buxoriy, Imom Termiziy va Maturidiy xalqaro ilmiy tadqiqot markazlari faoliyat yuritmoqda. Hozirda 30-iyul Xalqlar do'stligi va 16-noyabr Xalqaro bag'rikenglik kuni sifatida nishonlanib kelinmoqda. Bu 2 sanaga bag'ishlab Xalqlar do'stligi hamda diniy bag'rikenglik mukofotlari sohaning faol ishtirokchilariga, shu jumladan O'zbekistondagi turli konfessiya vakillariga topshirib kelinmoqda. O'zbekiston ichki siyosatda kuzatilayotgan keng qamrovli islohotlar, ochiqlik siyosati va yangilanishlar mamlakatning tashqi siyosatda ham yaqqol namoyon bo'lmoqda. O'zbekiston xalqaro munosabatlarning teng huquqli subyekti sifatida faol tashqi siyosatni yo'lga qo'ygan bo'lib, xorijiy hamkorlar bilan o'zaro manfaatli munosabatlarni shakllantirmoqda. O'zbekiston tashqi siyosiy faoliyatining asosiy vazifalaridan biri o'z hududida tinchlik, barqarorlik, xavfsizlik muhitini shakllantirish va shu nuqtai nazardan Prezident Shavkat Mirziyoyev qo'shnilarimiz Markaziy Osiyo davlatlari bilan do'stona yaqin qo'shnichilik va o'zaro manfaatli aloqalarni rivojlantirish va mustahkamlashni asosiy ustuvor tashqi siyosiy yo'nalish sifatida belgilab berdi. Prezident Shavkat Mirziyoyev tashabbuslari qo'shni davlatlar rahbarlari tomonidan qo'llab-quvvatlanishi natijasida Markaziy Osiyoda siyosiy muloqot va o'zaro ishonch mustahkamlandi, davlat rahbarlarining maslahat uchrashuvlari yo'lga qo'yildi. O'zbekiston prezidentining tashabbusi xalqaro miqyosda ham e'tirof etilmoqda. Aynan Shavkat Mirziyoyev taklifi bilan 2018-yil 12 dekabrda BMT Bosh Assambleyasi yalpi majlisida ma'rifat va diniy bag'rikenglik to'g'risidagi maxsus rezolyutsiya qabul qilindi. Rezolyutsiya Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkilotiga a'zo 100 dan oshiq davlatlar tomonidan qo'llab-quvvatlandi. Shu bilan birga Prezident tomonidan 2023-yil sentyabr oyida bo'lib o'tgan BMT Bosh Assambleyasida O'zbekiston Respublikasining poytaxti Toshkent shahrida UNESCO shafeligida dinlar aro muloqot va bag'rikenglik markazini tashkil etish tashabbusi e'lon qilindi. Hozirda UNESCO bilan hamkorlikda ushbu markazning ta'sis hujjatlari ishlanmoqda. Hurmatli ishtirokchilar, bugungi kunda global miqyosda jamiyatlar tinchligiga rahna soluvchi omillardan biri shubhasiz radikalizm, ekstremizm va ular keltirib chiqaradigan terrorizm balolaridir. Shu nuqtai nazardan O'zbekiston radikallashuvining oldini olish, yot oqimlar g'oyasiga ta'sir tushganlarni jamiyatga qayta moslashtirishda katta e'tibor qaratmoqda. Bu boradagi ishlarni quyidagi yo'nalishlarda olib boriladi. Birinchisi, fuqarolarni ijtimoiy jihatdan qo'llab-quvvatlash. So'nggi 7 yilda turli yot oqimlar ta'siriga berilib qilgan ishidan pushaymon bo'lgan 20 mingdan ortiq bu yerda ma'lumot bor. Ziyod fuqarolar reabilitatsiya qilindi. Ularni ijtimoiy qo'llab-quvvatlash, hayotda o'z o'rnini topishga yordam berilmoqda. O'zbekiston ijtimoiy hayotda mahalla jamoatchilik institutining roli muhimdir. Mahalla bu muayyan arealda qo'shnichilik istiqomat qiladigan oilalarning birlashmasi hisoblanadi. Mahalla oqsoqollari boshchiligida yoshi katta otaxon va onaxonlardan iborat faollar orqali boshqariladi. O'zbekistonda 10 mingga yaqin mahalla bo'lib, bu yerda ma'lumotlar berilgan. Ularning oila va shaxs hayotiga ta'siri katta hisoblanadi. Mahalla orqali davlat har bir oilaga kirib borish imkoniyatiga ega bo'ladi. Oilalarni yarashtirish, adashganlarni to'g'ri yo'lga solish, muhtojlarga ijtimoiy ko'mak ko'rsatishda mahallaning ahamiyati beqiyosdir. Bugungi kunda mahallalarda jazoni ijro etish muassasalaridan qaytgan 11 mingdan ortiq shaxslar bilan ishlar olib borilmoqda. Ularning muammolari aniqlab bartaraf etilmoqda. Ikkinchisi, radikalizm ta'siriga tushgan fuqarolar bilan individual ishlash va ularga g'amxo'rlik qilish. 2017-yildan Prezident Shavkat Mirziyoyev tashabbuslari bilan jazo o'tayotgan shaxslarni avf qilish instituti tashkil etildi, joriy qilindi. Natijada o'tgan davr mobaynida 1919 nafar ekstremizm va terrorizm bilan bog'liq jinoyatlarni sodir qilgan shaxslar avf qilindi. Ayni damda Mehr nomli maxsus operatsiyalar amalga oshirilib, 531 nafar ayollar hamda bolalar Suriya va Iroq hududidagi urush o'choqlaridan O'zbekistonga qaytarildi. Ularning moslashuv ga kasbga o'qitilishi va munosib ish bilan ta'minlanishiga alohida e'tibor qaratilmoqda. Shuningdek, 3-yo'nalishda radikalizm va ekstremizmning zararli oqibatlari hamda islom dini ta'limotlariga zid ekani haqida targ'ibot tadbirlarini o'tkazishga katta e'tibor qaratilmoqda. Shu maqsadda yoshlar va xotin-qizlar o'rtasida targ'ibot tushuntirish tadbirlarini o'tkazishga katta ahamiyat berilmoqda. Jumladan, o'tgan davr mobaynida 2017-24 yillar davomida 200 mingga yaqin ayol qizlar hamda 500 mingdan ortiq ayollar ishtirokidagi psixologik treninglar o'tkazildi. Diniy ulamolar, islomshunos olimlar tomonidan radikallashuvga moyilligi bo'lgan fuqarolar bilan yakkama-yakka suhbatlar o'tkazilib, ularni qiziqtirayotgan savollarga, bezovta qilayotgan shubhalarga diniy jihatdan javoblar berilmoqda. O'z shaxsini oshkor qilishni istamaganlar uchun esa fatvo markazi qoshida call center tashkil qilindi. Fuqarolar ushbu markazga anonim ravishda qo'ng'iroq qilish va o'z savollariga javob olish imkoniga ega bo'lmoqdalar. Prezident Shavkat Mirziyoyev rahnamoliklarida amalga oshirilayotgan mazkur chora-tadbirlar O'zbekistonni dunyoning eng xavfsiz mamlakatlaridan biriga aylanishiga sabab bo'lmoqda. Slayd to'g'rilab qo'ying. Xususan, Global Terrorism indeksi indeksida shuningdek Safety Perception indeksida tashkilotlarida reytinglarda O'zbekiston dunyoning eng xavfsiz mamlakatlari 5 taligidan joy oldi. O'zbekiston faoliyat yuritayotgan barcha konfessiyalar, davlat ravnaqi, fuqarolar farovonligi, jamiyatda tinchlik va do'stlik muhitini mustahkamlashga o'zlarining ulkan hissasini qo'shib kelmoqdalar. Ushbu forum davomida biz tabiatni asrab-avaylash, oziq-ovqat xavfsizligini ta'minlashda diniy tashkilotlar vakillarining rolini oshirish masalasiga alohida urg'u bermoqdamiz. O'zbekistonda ushbu yo'nalishda ham muhim qadamlar amalga oshirilmoqda. 2021-yilda Prezident Shavkat Mirziyoyev tashabbusi bilan ilgari surilgan Yashil makon umummilliy loyihasida o'tkazavering. Ko'cha tekish umummilliy loyihasida demak barcha shahar va qishloqlarimizda millionlab daraxtlar, ko'chatlar ekildi. Respublikamizda faoliyat yuritayotgan barcha diniy konfessiyalar vakillari, rahbarlari ushbu tashabbusni qo'llab-quvvatlab o'z izdoshlarini Yashil makon loyihasida faol ishtirok etishga chaqirib, turli din vakillarini yagona maqsad atrofida birlashtirdilar. Ushbu tadbirlar doirasida konfessiyalar rahbarlarining tashabbusi bilan Toshkent shahrining eng markaziy maydonida Yangi O'zbekiston bog'i hududida bag'rikenglik, tolerantlik bog'i tashkil etildi. Mana ko'rinib turibdi slaydda. O'zbekistonda so'nggi yillarda amalga oshirilayotgan barcha islohotlar markazida inson qadrini ulug'lashga qaratilgan ezgu g'oya mujassam. Chunki barcha dinlarda ham buyuk mutafakkirlarning boy ilmiy, ma'naviy merosida ham inson hayot gavhari tengsiz mo'jiza sifatida ulug'lanadi. O'zbekiston diniy bag'rikenglik, dinlar va millatlararo totuvlikni ta'minlash, radikalizm va ekstremizmga qarshi kurash borasida boy tajribaga ega bo'lib, ushbu yo'nalishda hamkorlik qilishga va tajriba almashishga doim tayyormiz. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your speech, and from in group and out of group, from inclusion to exclusion, from us and them, where Sheikh Lethome said, and the power of religion and exploitation of religion, to the power of education, then looking into the initiative that Uzbekistan already did. More than 200,000 women got trained, lots of mosques, churches. So thank you so much, and this sets an example for lots of government to follow as well.
I wish we had another 90 minutes to just scratch the surface.
I'm not sure we will be able to have questions because we're stopping between the lunch and this. So yes. Should we open for one question from the room and one from online, or I can
Is
see
there a burning
hand.
question?
I can see hand here.
Okay.
So.
Bom, eu me chamo Ivanildo dos Santos, sou professor da Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro pesquiso intolerância religiosa e sou interlocutor da Comissão de Combate à Intolerância Religiosa, do qual tem muçulmanos, judeus, católicos, protestantes, budistas. Primeiro, eu senti falta nas falas de falar da declaração e do plano de Durban. Falar de racismo no contexto internacional tem que lembrar a Conferência de Durban. Em nenhuma das falas eu vi senti falta da fala sobre essa conferência, que foi muito importante para se tratar da questão do racismo no mundo. Outra questão importante, o Brasil é o segundo maior país de população negra do mundo. Vocês estão num país que é o segundo maior país de população negra do mundo, onde os negros são 53% da população. Então era importante que essa experiência pudesse estar presente. E tem uma experiência no Brasil, que é a caminhada pela liberdade religiosa, qual todos os religiosos participam, que ganhou um prêmio do Departamento de Estado americano, em 2020. Então, essa é uma experiência que ela é muito também pouco conhecida fora do país. E no discurso do ódio, que me chama a atenção, não é só o discurso de ódio, é o silêncio dos bons, como dizia Martin Luther King. É o silêncio dos bons. Se, por um lado, é um grupo minoritário que destila o ódio, o preconceito, aqui no Brasil isso é muito típico, né? Mas o silêncio da ampla maioria dos religiosos é um grande problema, porque acaba ressaltando esse discurso de ódio com muito mais força ainda, porque não se coloca contra. Então, acho que, além do discurso de ódio, tem que pensar também na questão do silêncio, porque até onde o silêncio é concordância. Embora você não se coloque publicamente contra, você acaba, no final, concordando. É um grande dilema que nós temos que levar no ponto de vista das pesquisas e das ações que nós temos que ter.
Unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity to plumb that very important issue. This is such a vast topic that we've only scratched the surface. But I hope that the messages that we have received from our distinguished panelists have sparked some thought and some introspection and some assessment as to what each of us can individually contribute to righting the wrongs that we are seeing all too frequently in our society. And I finish by reminding you that the United Nations has declared June 18 as the International Day for Countering Hate Speech. It was initially done in 2022, and so that is a day for us to remember and to ponder these issues. We thank you for your participation, for your attendance, and I guess we adjourn to go to lunch.